It is a practice, by the way, very recent in terms of liturgical history. In the last 200 or 300 years maximum did it come into being, and in some places, by the way, was never adapted in the Orthodox world. But it is the practice of having a service that was originally intended for the late afternoon, probably, because people for the most part tended to have Vespers, the evening service, in earlier times, not after dark the way we often do now, but late in the afternoon. If you go to the monasteries on the Holy Mountain, that's when it is. Because, first of all, and even in the temple in Jerusalem under the Old Covenant, the evening sacrifice in the temple was offered at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, or the equivalent of 3 p.m. And that's because, given the way of life that was common there, whatever you were going to do in the church had to get done, and you had to go home, and you had to have your meal, and by that time it was getting dark, and when it got dark, you went to bed, everything was over. So, anyhow, though, there's evening services in the Typicon, very much insurance is made to make sure that they will be held toward the evening, and likewise vigil services in the early morning, often before light, but nevertheless as morning service. So the practice of anticipating services, historically speaking, cannot be spoken of as that traditional of a practice, if we're talking about 1700 years of liturgical tradition. As a matter of fact, before the most specific note in this regard is found in every single edition of the Typicon to this day. If you read the whole thing, often this was one of the things that sometimes you don't get to read because they don't translate it. But regarding the service on Holy Saturday, the Vesperal Liturgy on Holy Saturday, in which these two rhythms intersect. On the one hand, it is the end of the entire Holy Week. On the other hand, it is the beginning of the celebration of Pascha. And there is a note to the ecclesiarch before that service. And it says, the ecclesiarch must be very diligent that he may ascertain that the service begins at such a time so that it will conclude around 2 hours after dark. And that is because when the gospel of the resurrection is proclaimed from St. Matthew, which says literally, in the evening of the Sabbath, opsis opsias ton sabbaton, before the first day of the week began to dawn, or in the Latin of the Vulgate, vespere autem sabbati, speaking of the night that begins, the night of the resurrection that begins with the going down of the sun. By the time that gospel is proclaimed, the Sabbath is to be past, it is to be dark. So the Typicon to this day says that, and often very little heeded by many, but nevertheless, that is the great care that's taken for the meshing of the services with the cycles of nature, of the daily cycle. Then we have, of course, the weekly cycle. Weekly cycle, first of all, is most intensely expressed on the Lord's Day, the day that is consecrated to the celebration of the resurrection of the Lord, the weekly Pascha, but also includes the daily focuses, let's say, that have come to exist. For example, Monday for the angels, Tuesday for the forerunner, Wednesday for the Theotokos and the Passion, Thursday for the apostles, Friday for the cross and the Passion, Saturday for all saints and for the dead. And of course, as we know, the hymnography of that weekly cycle in the Octoikos in those cycles of 8, which is one of the great works of theological genius of the hymnographers of the church to make this measuring of time using that figure of the eternal day, the day that is beyond the counting of the days of this week. That's the whole point behind the having not only 8 tones of liturgical chant, but an 8 weekly cycle of liturgical texts. Weekly cycle is, as expressed then in the octoicos. Then we have the annual cycle, or we could call it the monthly, or sometimes called the fixed, or immovable. And this is the inheritance that we have, that of course developed throughout the centuries of the church's life, of celebrating particular feast days on a fixed day every year. First, glorifying the mysteries of our redemption, such as the nativity and the theophany of Christ, the transfiguration, the elevation of the cross, the feasts of the Mother of God, the feasts of the great saints, the feasts of the local saints, and finally the liturgical commemorations of all those saints who have entered into their heavenly life, generally, because generally, again, not absolutely, generally the day that is chosen, if it is known for celebrating the memory of a saint, is the day on which he dies. Of course, you know that we celebrate only 3 births in the church, that of the Lord, that of the Mother of God, and that of the Forerunner, and 3 conceptions, likewise. But the saint's day is the day of his death. So the liturgical material that we have for the annual cycle is found in that 12-volume series called the Meneon. And, there's even now, of course, it's not a complete translation. I understand the St. John of Kronstadt Press in Tennessee has provided a complete translation of the Meneon, which you can buy for, I think, something like $800, and you'll get an immense box full of translations from the Meneon. There's also a partial translation available. Now, I think at least half of the months are done. This is done not officially by Orthodox auspices. It's printed by the Melkites. But in my examination of it, it is accurate. It's a simple translation of the Orthodox service books. I haven't found anything added in it from non-Orthodox sources. And in general, if you use the style of English that at least attempts toward a contemporary but elevated style, as opposed to, well, maybe we shouldn't say opposed, but as distinct from the early modern style of English, and that I don't want to enter into that debate of which style of English it's going to be. We all have our opinions about that. And it's going to be a while till that's all hashed out in the English-speaking Orthodox world. But anyhow, there are these volumes available now that are very useful. I noticed a number of you looking at it and didn't know where it came from. You can get them from Light and Life or directly from the Melkites, or some Orthodox bookstores now are stocking them. And then, finally, we have the Paschal cycle. The Paschal cycle, we could say, consists of a very significant portion of the year. In fact, I think it's roughly 1/3 of the year that begins with the Sunday of the Publican and Pharisee and continues till the week after All Saints, the Sunday of All Saints. So that's the whole period of the weeks prior to the Great Fast, and then Lent itself, and Holy Week, and Bright Week, and the 50-day Paschal celebration. So, if we are speaking of, what time is it? Oh, good, okay. If we're speaking of the order of the services, and I am going to, on these days, I think, limit myself to speaking, unless you want to have questions about anything else, but speaking primarily about the services of the Liturgy of Time, in these various cycles, because it's for these things that most of the questions arise that people have about services. To have familiarity with the order of the services for a given day assumes that, first of all, we realize that in any given service, we have those elements of the service which are fixed, those which do not change from day to day, and those elements of the service which do, the movable parts of the service, which are often sometimes referred to as the propers, those which vary from day to day. And to know what is supposed to go on in any given day, one has to refer to, if one can't refer to the full typicon, one has to refer to whatever appropriate extraction has been given in a liturgical guide, how the hymnography for these various 4 cycles is to be arranged. And the questions regarding that are behind most of what is asked about liturgical practice. The services of every given year, of every given week, of every given day are an intermeshing of these 4 cycles: the daily, the weekly, the annual, and the paschal. And so, first of all, this will be the final bit of information, because again, I think that just from my sense of things, that this particular body of explanation might still be, if not, I don't think totally new, but to look at it in a kind of methodical sort of way might be new to you. And that is the classification of days, the rank of days. In order to know what is going to be done on any given day, because it is this, as to this date, there's a big joke in Ben Lomond about my resistance of computerization. And I have successfully resisted it to this day. And I claim that the last thing on earth that will ever be subject to the mysteries, to me, of what computers can do will be what happens every year in the meshing of the liturgical cycles of our church. That because the variations can be so many, and there's 2 ways to look at this. One, I think, jaded way to look at it is to see it as an unduly complex and incomprehensible mixing together of expressions of liturgical hymnography, that we would be far better off with something just plain and simple. They're passing out something. Oh, no. Okay, I knew they threatened me with this. Okay. I have a copy. Okay, thank you, Father Terry. So, yes. In the Typicon, there is, for every day, a system of ranking the liturgical weight or the liturgical importance of any feast that's celebrated. And so this is something that I think should not be, before I say that, that's one way of what I just said previously before this was passed out. Sometimes people dismiss all of what appears to be a very complicated system of rubrics regarding liturgical hymnography as something that we would be very much better off just discarding, coming up with something much more simple and straightforward. In my opinion, I think this is an unfortunate utilitarian approach to liturgy. Orthodox piety has been fed for centuries on this daily and weekly and annual pageant, as it were, reflecting a life in which the things that we look forward to are most often to be found in church and not in other places, as is the case in our time now. Our fathers in the faith struggled, I'm sure, sometimes, but they were able to look upon the liturgical tradition as a great treasure and a delight, and what came up on the menu every day was more delightful to them than the earthly bread. So I think that's something we need also in our time. I believe personally that wherever an attempt is made for the sake of the love of God and as a manifestation of what He has done for us, wherever that life is cultivated and encouraged in this time when even the most basic expressions of beauty or what we would call culture are threatened, then the life of the church is truly being fostered. But anyhow, the Typicon provides a system of ranking of days because in the liturgical tradition there are some days that are greater than other days. And what they use, and this is something with which everyone needs to be familiar, not just a few liturgical experts. What is used in the Typicon is a system of signs. What I try to do is convert those signs in, we like numbers better than signs. So I'll show you what both the signs and the wonders are. If you look at any day in the Typicon, it will have either nothing in front of it to mark it, or it will have a sign, and the signs will look like this. There's a cross with a circle. There's a cross. There's a funny little thing looking like this. I don't know what this means, but it's there. And this, in terms of a numbering system, there are two expressions of a cross and a circle translated into numbers. And then there are many days, in fact, the majority of days, that have no sign at all, and I'll give those, they don't have a sign, but I will give them a number, 5. So we can speak of 5 classes of liturgical celebrations, and we'll go from the greatest to the least. First class are the great feasts of the Lord. By the way, in this classification is Pascha. Pascha is traditionally referred to as the Feast of Feasts and beyond any classification. So it's super first class. Included, therefore, in this first class would be those feasts such as the Nativity, the Theophany, the Transfiguration, the Elevation of the Cross. Great feasts of Christ. They have certain features. I can't use this talk to try to go through and detail all the features of each one of these classes. I just like to give you so you have a basic familiarity with them. They always have not just one day. There is always a pre-feast of one or several days and a post-feast afterwards. If the day of the feast falls on Sunday, it completely displaces Sunday, so that nothing of the usual service of the resurrection in the tone of the week will be sung. For example, this year, the Nativity of Christ on the new calendar falls on Sunday, December 25th. That week, there will be nothing. That day, there will be nothing of whatever Sunday it would be in whatever tone it is sung. It will be all of the Nativity of Christ. And as you can see, there are relatively few of days that have such strength to knock out Sunday, as it were. Second class would be, first of all ordinary Sundays, great feasts of the Mother of God, and a few great feasts of saints, such as the nativity and beheading of the forerunner, Saints Peter and Paul, the patronal feast of the local church, now, these feasts, in the case of the feasts of the Theotokos, likewise have a pre-feast and a post-feast. If they fall on Sunday, they are celebrated in conjunction with the service of the resurrection. There is a combining, so that there can be as full as possible an expression of both what's being celebrated, both the resurrection of the Lord and the feast of the saints. So there'll be a combination. Now, the third class refers to what is commonly, though this term is not used in the Typicon, but you find it commonly used, middle feasts. And they tend to be the feasts of the greatest of the saints. For example, such as the apostles Andrew and John. Not even all the rest of the 12. The greatest of the great fathers, Saint Anthony the Great, Saint Basil, Saint John Chrysostom. If we look through, if we look through the next couple months, for this month, in October, if one is in the Greek tradition, October 26th, St. Demetrius is a middle feast, but not in the rest. In November, the Feast of the Angels. On November 8th, St. Michael and all the angels is a middle feast. St. Andrew the Apostle on November 30th is middle feast. January 1st, the circumcision of the Lord, St. Basil the Great. Those are examples of middle feasts. Likewise, if they fall on Sunday, they are celebrated in conjunction with the Sunday service of the resurrection. But in this case, a little more of the resurrection will be done and a little less of the feast. The next classification is sometimes referred to as lesser feasts. And they tend to be such days as we have today. For example, we have the feast of one of the rest of the apostles, St. Thomas, and also combined with that, it is for the United States. It's the anniversary of the canonization of St. Innocent, and because the day of St. Innocent's death always falls during Lent or Holy Week on March 31st, and frequently, therefore, not much expression can be given to its celebration. We'll have the canonization day as an attempt to have a more complete celebration of the saint. And it can also include days that are saints that are especially celebrated in the life of a local church. And all of these four categories, one of the ways that you can tell you're having one of these days, there's a couple of things that characterize them. First of all, at Matins, at the end of Matins, the great doxology, the sung doxology, will be sung. If any of these days should fall on a Wednesday or a Friday, the ordinary strict fast of Wednesday and Friday will be mitigated in some way. Generally, it will be, if it's one of these days, it will say that there is wine and oil are permitted. If it's something higher, depending, fish will be permitted as a way of giving an expression through the food of the joy of the day. Then finally, there are the days that have no sign. And they are mostly everything else. And of course, they are the most of the commemorations of the saints day by day, which they are given certain expressions throughout the cycle of the day. The Troparion of the day will be given to the saint, and there will be varying amounts of hymnography that could be sung at Vespers and Matins, prescribed to be sung at Vespers and Matins, in addition to whatever is prescribed to be done for the day of the week. But these days do not have any of the expressions that we have come to understand as festal. There's great Vespers would not be celebrated for these days, whereas great Vespers could be celebrated for anything in this rank, and from the third rank up, it's understood that it will be celebrated, great Vespers. But for these days, it'll be ordinary daily Vespers. At Matins, it will be the simple doxology, the red doxology, should any of these days on fast days, there is no mitigation of the fast. So have that in mind. Some service books give, for example, one of the things these editions of the Manea do give the ranking of each day. It's an important thing to know for each day, how much weight it has in the daily cycle of things. I think for today that's a handy place to stop. So hopefully, maybe, do you find this kind of thing useful? I always need to ask that. Okay, and if you have some question.
We've got into conversations about, should their fast start in the evening and end the following day. In a way, this thing of viewing the days of Lent different helps explain, because you maybe make a comment on fasting in terms of the daily cycle.
Sure.
Normally and in the Lent.
Sure. Well, the daily fasts have their, I'll make a historical comment first, have their root in the earliest fast established by the church. That's which is referred to in the Didache and in the Shepherd of Hermas and the lives of the early saints, which consistent description of the fast that is kept on Wednesday and Friday. Always there is a mention of the context of those days in terms of the Passion. The betrayal of the Lord is spoken of on Wednesday, the crucifixion on Friday. They're always kept in the same way, and this is from the first century, that fasting is understood then to mean the restriction of the food taken to one meal, and that meal is taken after the 9th hour, and the 9th hour is clearly chosen as the time for ending, because the 9th hour is the time of the death of the Lord. Just as the service of the 9th hour, that's the focus of it, on the death of the Lord. There is not in this most primitive expression of fasting anything said about the kind of food that's eaten after the fast is broken. That comes later. But what remains consistent, and consistent, by the way, for example, if you go to a place that keeps the full rule of the fast, like an Athonite monastery, or even please God, you don't have to go so far to find places where people are keeping the traditional fast. But that is the rhythm. A fast day begins in the morning and continues to wherever it's going to. The idea of, for example, saying tomorrow is Friday, so therefore we'll start to fast tonight, that you wouldn't find any witness borne to that in the received tradition, to my knowledge. And as a matter of fact, I know I've experienced this myself. For example, in the monasteries, when the kind of the big meal on Cheese Fair Sunday before Lent begins, when that is eaten is after Forgiveness Vespers. not before. They have forgiveness vespers. They have the mutual forgiveness, and then they go down to the refectory and load up on eggs and whatever it is they're going to load up on before Lent and clean out the refectory. So there's no notion of we've had forgiveness vespers now, and therefore, see, here's an example of how these principles cannot be absolutized. In fact, if you look in the Triodion, for example, you'll see the weeks before Lent, Sunday of Publican, Pharisee, Prodigal Son, Meat Fair, Cheese Fair Sunday, end of Cheese Fair Sunday, they'll give you forgiveness vespers. And then usually after forgiveness vespers, there's a sheet or part of a sheet with a great big cross. And then it will say the holy and great 40 days of the fast. And I'll begin with Matins on Monday morning. So, is that... Father Terry. I'm told people are doing it. Of course, you're not talking about a little book here. And if it is out, it will be, I've even heard, I forget where I heard it, but somebody said that they have finished such a thing. The Typicon of St. Savas. Published. Well, yeah. It will be, on the one hand, it will be as it's intended to be in the church, an invaluable tool. It's not to be meant to be used the way some people use the Rudder, as extrapolating some statement and making it into some sort of absolute expression binding in all times. But rather, everything that is there is to be seen as an expression of the church's life and of those most basic things that formed our services. So I would personally look very much forward to it. Yes, Father Philip. Yes, there are. The most common one is the so-called abridged Typicon that is printed officially by the Moscow Patriarchate and then translated into English. Again, it's a useful tool, but one must realize that in this volume is contained not only abridgments from the Typicon, but also statements made by the compilers. Just as when you look at the Rudder, there are the canons, then there's the commentary, then there's the commentary on the commentary. So you have to know what you're reading there. For example, there's a very funny thing in the abridged Typicon about how it's an abomination that the holy icons be surrounded with light bulbs. Well, that's not from the Typicon of St. Savas. That's from some... Yeah. So you yeah, flowers on the altar in containers with stinking, decaying organic matter. Okay, well, what I thought we would do on the other days then is using these principles, maybe go through Vespers and Matins and those things that come up most commonly when we're preparing to have. And also those portions of the divine liturgy which are influenced by the liturgy of time, particularly in the liturgy of the word, the changeables. Father Basil.
One of the things I'd like to talk about or hear you say something on, I mentioned this a little bit ago, but when you look to, let's say we particularly would like to do some services related to St. Catherine. Mm-hmm. And trying to put, is there some kind of a hierarchy of services where we don't feel compelled to do all of Vespers and all of Matins and the preparation service and the preparation for the preparation service and liturgy when, for example, I'm already teaching all the time. What do I do to make it accountable so that we can do it in our
I will speak of that. When we do speak of that, of course, it's people talking about their opinions, but still, there's a place for that. Yeah. Everybody abbreviates the services, by the way. Even the holy monasteries on Mount Athos. The only place that I have been in my limited travels where the services were absolutely unabbreviated, to my knowledge of the Typicon, is Old Valam. So it's a question of how we're going to do it. That's what we have to ask, and we'll address that. Yes, Father Troy. Yeah, I can do that. Okay. 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 Okay.